Hey everyone, welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. You're going to get a little more intimate episode today, as it's just myself and Rob on the line and recording today.
Yeah.
But that's all you got? Yeah, you got nothing
Well,
else
no,
for me,
I'm
man?
agreeing with you. It's 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
2 out of 3 ain't bad. And Tim will be back with us in a couple weeks. He's got a little well-earned vacation time, so.
Yeah.
You'll miss him for a couple episodes, but we're excited that he's getting some downtime with the family, and hopefully all of you are getting a little of that out there out there in cyber world as well.
Brian, I gotta say, like, over the last few months, you have completely changed your background, and it's looking pretty dapper back there, man. It's looking good.
We're working on some cleanup, and this is only phase 1, man.
Okay.
You will see over time, my trusty listeners, if you care to watch our YouTube, we are building the VCIO Toolbox Studios as we speak. So this is my office where I've been for quite some time, and I love to play with the mood lighting, and all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, we are we're doing some work. Going to have a couple different settings for some of the things that we're doing for a couple of the companies. Sales maturity, of course, being part of that, Rob.
Sure. Yeah.
And what we work on together, and we're excited. Content marketing is a huge part of everybody's play these days. And now that we've been doing the podcast for a while, I think we've at least learned how to be somewhat comfortable in front of the camera. Right?
Yes. I highly recommend that you don't watch those first couple episodes.
Watch them, don't watch them. It could be fun to see how, if you're wondering, can I ever get better at this? You can. I mean, now the question is whether or not people really think we're better, but hey.
At least we're more comfortable doing it.
That's it. So today, I thought we'd talk a little bit, Rob, about risk, and we're hearing a lot out in the marketplace. Obviously, cyber liability is a hot conversation out in the marketplace, and getting cyber liability insurance can be a challenge for some organizations. We have a lot of conversation going on about, how do we engage with our customers and drive some of those security conversations that are out there. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things that I feel you can do is really engage with your customer in first understanding risk during the sales process, or even just as part of a traditional QBR setting. Mm-hmm. And then maybe taking the next step in risk by introducing frameworks to them to really manage their organization. So, that's kind of what I figured we would talk a little bit about today. What have you been hearing out in the market space as far as, risk in sales? Anything from your seat?
Well, at first I'd like you to define a little bit better. What are we talking about when we're talking about risk? Are you talking about as it relates to like the insurance side? Are you talking about the hacking side? Like, what exactly do you mean when you say the global word risk?
So let's call it just that. It's the global word risk, right?
You stole my line.
Risk comes in, yeah, I sure did, man. Risk comes in various shapes and sizes, right? And I think that's something that we sometimes get a little pigeonholed on. There's risk management in your financial portfolio, right? Yeah. Risk management, of course, in banking and finance has been there a long time. We have risk management that we're all working on doing as it relates to the cyber threats that we're facing. There's risk management in terms of health, right? I mean, we just went through the pandemic not too long ago, and that was an area where very severe risk management protocol was put into play. So when you really look at risk, it's the dangers that you're facing in the context of what you're trying to achieve, right? So, if I looked at myself as a person, I have personal risk, right? I got health risks that you want to make sure that you're maintaining and doing your best to avoid. Financial risk can come into play. As we get older, we change our portfolio mix from super aggressive to maybe a little bit more conservative and balance things out because, we need to preserve. Yep. When you look at risk as you're raising your kids, it's all about, not letting them do things that might put them in harm's way, right? So, risk is such a broadly used term that we need to hone in on it. Today, obviously we'll be talking about it in the terms of tech speak, right?
Yeah. So like, when we're talking about risk in that way, what we are finding is something that you brought up, Brian. I think you brought it up maybe 18 months ago at this point. You were a leader in that the question isn't so much cybersecurity, cyber resilience, and all that kind of stuff. It's risk tolerance. That is the question on the sales side that we try and force our employees and the sales reps that we manage to have conversations with the prospects. That's the number one thing that you have to understand before you can open it up into all these different parts of the risk platforms that you're using out there. Because if they don't have any tolerance, then you're good. If they don't care about risk at all, then you don't need to go down all those kind of roads. But I think that's the first conversation that people need to have.
Well, I think, there's a couple things around that conversation that are important too, Rob. First and foremost, obviously, yes, it is good to identify what your tolerance, what your customer's tolerance for risk is. That said, sometimes they don't even know the risk they're facing, right? So it's
That's
tough
why I
to
like it so much. Yep.
it's tough to gauge a tolerance, right? One of the things that we certainly do through the BCIO Toolbox platform is we engage our customers to really try to understand their risk tolerance. There, I'm looking more across a group of stakeholders, and I'm saying, are they on the same page, right? You got a point of contact who's kind of your day-to-day operator for IT telling you that they're at a 3 because they know the realities of the risk they're facing from an IT perspective. And you got a CEO that's out there saying, no, we're totally risk averse. We can't allow any kind of risk of consequence to come into our business. Now you can make some security sales or at least drive some security conversations because there's a mismatch. And that CEO might be overreaching their bounds and saying where they sit today.
The thing that I liked about it, and I don't mean to take it away from the risk conversation and put it into risk tolerance, but it's so important when you did that, you took a qualitative measurement, risk tolerance, and made it quantifiable, right? So you took it from a 1 to 5, and then that framed everything to where you can have a conversation with somebody where they can put it into a number and then have the conversations about what is their tolerance? Why a 3? What does a 3 mean to you, Brian? That's the part that really opened up the entire conversation, for us when we were training our reps.
Yeah. And then think about it a little differently too, from that perspective. There's also this challenge of not all risks need to be solved, right? Because there are risks that we might be facing that the cost justification versus the percentage opportunity of risk align.
Yes.
And, so when you go into a customer who says they're a 3 or a 4, that doesn't necessarily mean they're being negligent. It just might be that, look, we have a realistic budget. We know we can only protect to the best of our capabilities. We don't, or we think there's some risk on the table that isn't likely to happen. So, we're looking at ourselves as a 3, but they could still care about locking the doors where the doors are able to be locked. And that's, that's part of what you got to try to flesh out during that part of the process, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah. And you guys, and I know I'm kind of pitching a little bit here, but you guys have kind of framed that out in 1 through 5. Have you guys done that?
Yeah, well, we've got that risk, we've got that risk tolerance as part of our business insights approach, where we're really working with our customers to build a joint strategic plan. We want to understand where that's
the thing I like. Yeah.
We want to understand where that risk is, and we want to get on the same page as the customer. So we're making recommendations that are going to push the needle, and we're not doing things just for the sake of opinion, if you will, right?
Yeah.
But, kind of to me, like so let's take it first from a sales process. There's a lot going on in the forums about, hey, use risk assessment as a sales opportunity. And absolutely, right? We're always looking for the penetration point to get in with the customer and close the deal. But understand about risk when you're doing that too, and what that really means to the customer. And, it's the old 2 ears, 1 mouth concept. To listen to the customer when they talk to you, because, look, risk is so I'm going to step away from sales for a minute. I'm going to kind of talk into the first step of assessing, right? And that's really building out a risk register for your organization. Now, a lot of risk registers come pre-populated with some various things that are real, right? Hey, is your customer, and they go into things that go beyond what we think about as tech, but certainly impact tech running, right? Hey, is there a potential for an earthquake? Well, here in the Northeast, we've had a couple earthquakes, but nothing that's shattering, nothing that's probably going to stop business overall, right? So most Northeast companies would look at that as a low inherent risk for them. Totally different conversation if you're in Southern California, right? There you might, it still might not be what you would classify as a high risk opportunity for you, but you're probably going to look at that risk a little bit differently than we do here in the Northeast. And that, and that's the same thing for, how we treat data. Everybody has some level of sensitive data in their systems, no matter how big or how small you are. It starts just with, employee number one. Once you get employee number one, you've got social security numbers that are sensitive information. You might have some insurance history that can be sensitive, and you got to protect it. But a lot of the smaller organizations have a little bit lower risk posture, if you will, because they're only holding employee data and IP. Start moving up the ladder, you might be holding employee data, sensitive financial data, maybe some sensitive health data as well, right?
Yeah.
And now it becomes a bigger risk on how you treat your data systems. Now, if you're supporting the community at large and a risk, and the risk of some sort of breach could impact public service, fire, police, health, those kind of things that are majorly government, right? Those become much larger risks on the spectrum. So step one in really being able to identify a risk tolerance is saying, what's the data I hold? And what matters, and then going a step back to that risk register concept. What are the risks I inherently face just being on this planet, right?
Right.
Hey, I've got the risk of, as I mentioned, a natural disaster, and those natural disasters will classify themselves differently in different regions.
Yeah.
We've got risk of power outage that always sits there in front of some of us. Then we've got our employee risk. So, there's a bunch of standard risks, and then there's going to be risks within your company. We're holding data for this third party that, if it got out to the marketplace, could do X, right? And fill those variables as you see fit. And that's going to give you a different risk classification. But when you kind of put together all your risks in your register, and this is before you do a gap analysis or understand where it ties into various areas of technology, really what you're trying to do is identify where does my risk lie? Now, you may add to that risk register as you conduct an assessment.
So I got a question for you. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, it's great.
You've got your sales rep out there, right? And they're talking to this prospect. You have the owner, whoever's doing the, whether it's principal led or sales led, and they're having these conversations. I mean, you kind of just blew me up there with so much different stuff that you were talking about. How can we coordinate this and kind of make it more of a cohesive, linear process?
So let's start with the sales cycle, and then let's go into real life, right?
Okay.
So in the sales cycle, when you go in there, don't be the rep that just goes, "Hey, Rob, man, what's your tolerance for risk?"
Right. Okay.
What you got to ask is, "Hey, Rob, risk is a big part of understanding how deep to go on security, right?" And one of the, and you can use this as a benefit selling point for your company. We don't just want to put security tools in for security's sake. We need to understand a little bit more about what drives your business and what you're concerned about in your data. Not all data is equal, right? And, again, you may be supporting just employee data. Well, obviously you want to safeguard your employee data the best of your ability, but you probably got a little more forgiveness with your employees than you might with the public at large, right? What other sensitive data do you hold? Okay, you've got your company financials. Might only be really useful to your company, right? But you've got those company financials. What else do you got? Are you a software company like we are? Hey, you've got your IP and your code that you're building, and that certainly carries a value and would have a risk if it was out there in the marketplace, right? If somebody gets your code, they're 80% of the way to being you in a day.
Okay, so basically you're just going straight back into questions-based selling, uncovering needs by asking questions as it relates to what their business does and how their business does it and when their business does it as it relates to the risk.
Right, but you're also trying to use it so you can kind of answer back to the customer. Okay, now that I understand a little bit about your data, and it might not be in sales call number one, but these are the things that I think, you need to have in place. How many of them are in place, right? And that kind of gets into the next stat piece, which is a lot of customers have never really done a proper security review, especially if they're on the smaller end. Yet they're being asked by their cyber liability companies to answer these behemoth questionnaires in many cases about their security posture. And sometimes they're putting in answers that they think are true, but they don't really know, right? And let's face it, we've seen it already happen. The insurers are trying to find out how now to pay those claims down the road.
They're starting to come through a lot. Yeah,
right. So we need to start really guiding our customers during the sales process too, that the risk is not just so I, as a service provider, can sell you some stuff. I'd already known you're sitting on that side of the table. I'm on this one. Eventually that part's going to happen. But how do we make sure that we're mitigating risk in a way that meets the wallet and need of your business, and you're putting your best foot forward to protect yourself and can show that to a cyber liability company. One of the things that happened, so we could probably push in a little bit to frameworks now, but one of the statistics that was interesting when they were putting together, the CMMC 2.0, which is built very largely on the NIST 800-171, was almost 75% of the vendors reported themselves as 100% compliant to the NIST 800-171 in their self-attestation. And the chances that 75% of those vendors were 100% compliant with 100+ different control sets is almost impossible. And what the DoD is looking at when they engage you as a vendor is, hey, look, I don't expect you to be 100%. Where are you? Am I willing to take on that inherent risk that might come with taking you? How do I value that against what the exposure might be for my business? And then I expect you to improve on it over time. So as you build a plan of action, every time you make an upgrade, we expect you to report it. And really what we want to make sure, because we know you can't build everything in a day, that you're at least following to the letter of your plan. If you're building a 3-year plan to get rid of that risk, okay. If I'm willing to accept the inherent risk that comes with a 3-year plan, I will as a buyer. But I want to see that the progress is happening at the intervals you outlined and have you report that back into me, right? So the point is there's nothing bad about having risk on the table, just like your portfolio. It's just how do you manage that risk so you're attacking the things that are most important first and the things that the people you do business with most might care about most importantly first.
The industry is maturing so fast as it relates to risk. It's amazing how fast it's going, compared to, other maturity levels that grew up over time. Like this one is just exploding, right? Because there's so much money in it, I think, and the insurance industry is coming into it. But explain to me a little bit more about the frameworks and talk to me a little bit about that.
So now we can kind of pivot a little bit into the fact that there's a lot of different frameworks and regulations that are industry based out in the market space, right? But let's kind of focus for today and the time we got on the cyber frameworks, right? Everybody should have a good cybersecurity posture for their business. It's just good business. It's going to help you get that liability insurance. It's going to get you there. And there are a lot of different frameworks, which are really just groups of controls that have been defined that you can define if you've implemented and how you measure against those controls over time, right? So, the one of the biggest governing bodies that everybody knows about is the NIST, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And they've got the cybersecurity framework. Right now it's at version 1.1. It's actually in process of getting migrated up to version 2.0. There's a lot of activity going there. And really it's just a high level assessment for managing what control sets you have in place to best secure your environment and reduce the risk that your company is facing from a cyber threat perspective, right? And, the NIST framework is pretty cool. And the reason people like it a lot is it looks at 5 different domain functions: identify, protect, detect, response, and recover, right? So it's identifying when a threat has entered into your world, protecting the systems once that threat arrives to the best of your ability. Well, actually, take a step back. It's identifying, I'm jumping ahead here a little bit. It's identifying the risks that your company's facing. That's step 1. Then putting in solutions to best protect those risks. But knowing that not every risk is going to be attended to, nor is any perimeter impenetrable, especially the interior perimeter where humans exist. Then we've got our detect layer, right? And now we're looking at how can we detect these different issues that a customer might be, or these different threats as they come into our system. Then we have to have a response plan. And what's that response plan looks like depends on the type of threat you're facing. It might just be contain it. It might be simply pull that plug out of that system. It could be a much deeper response methodology there. And then, of course, you got your recovery step. How do we recover? And then how do we do kind of that look back afterward, and make sure that we don't experience this again. So, NIST is a very popular framework. Today, it consists of 108 different controls that you can manage to and build policy against. Other big ones in the industry, CMMC is coming into play. Obviously, a lot of you listeners know that CMC has kind of been in flux for a few years now. a lot of folks went and got that AB certification and
Yeah.
really weren't able to use it yet. And we're still waiting for, the full 3 levels to come out with the NIST 800-172 framework coming into play, but it's coming. One of my favorite cyber frameworks is the CIS controls. So this is from the Center of Internet Security, and it's a 3 implementation group control set, the bottom level being 56 controls. And it's called Implementation Group 1. And the reason I like that one is it's geared to what most of the MSP community supports. That's customers under 250 people who are generally not being targeted by cyber, terrorists, but fall into being vulnerable because they might get port scanned by a bot or something like that. And a penetration area might show up. And of course, they might throw some ransomware or some other, threat into your system because, hey, there might still be some money to be made. Yeah. But it wasn't because they were going after Rob Rogers and OSR directly. It was because, hey, scanned all the ports, your IP came up and we were able to get in there, right? So CIS is really geared for non-targeted companies that are, at risk, that could have ports open because they don't generally have security professionals on staff, i.e. why they're reaching to the MSPs and MSSP community. And it's really focused on, kind of the first 3 of the NIST, the identify, the protect, and detect. Doesn't go as deeply into recover then. Then you can graduate up to implementation group 2, where you usually have some security professionals there. And now you're getting maybe into some customized, not off the shelf solutions. And then you've got your implementation group number 3, which really is dealing with the vendors that are the companies that support us publicly, your hospitals, your police forces, your departments of health and human services, folks that, if that data got out, there could be some real exposure. Public welfare could be threatened. So that's one of my faves.
So, Brian, just to, kind of close it up here, you deal with a lot of clients, right? You deal with a lot of people. On your side of the house, are you seeing a lot of opportunities being developed leading with this type, or is this a once they're in, land and expand type of situation for you?
It's twofold. It's definitely land and expand for your existing customers. Mm-hmm. But I think I do see it becoming a new approach model to the conversation with the customer. What the opportunity for the MSP is, hey, it could be simply doing professional assessments to a particular industry that requires it and doing it in a one-off fashion. Can be done, not the most exciting in my opinion. But then you can really start building, compliance as a service programs where maybe you're running vulnerability scanners that are out in the marketplace today. A couple big ones out there, Connect Secure, the former Simon or CNS, and Charisma are a couple that help you understand where those gaps are in the client's environment. And then it's really tying that back to the assessment portion of it, which is also developing process and procedure and policy for managing this process. So the vulnerability scanners give you the information so you can really understand where the vulnerabilities live and map that to the controls that you need to. But compliance as a service, that's a hot opportunity to increase the value of your security stack, to put something in play that's a new managed service with monthly recurring. Take it even one step further and go into the vCISO as a service layer, where you can really put somebody in that is in that leadership role for the organization, helping them not only build policy and procedure and doing what you're doing in compliance as a service, but also being part of your team in understanding where people and policies intersecting with your environment. Is HR doing what they're supposed to be doing to set the tone for when people are using technology or working from home? Do those policies exist? Looking at the architecture of your environment and seeing where things could be mitigated and risk might be born, and making different connections there and working on the architecture. So there's a whole professional services layer that can absolutely be built into an as a service, and is being built by many, that the MSP can go to. And when it's in that case, it is a leader, right? It's definitely, going forward, with a new proposition. Obviously, these are all upsell opportunities with your existing client base.
I'm seeing, so I understand on the land and expand side, but I am also seeing on the sales side, the new logo side, you're right. The as a service is starting to really pick up where, you're working with code managed, you were usually working on the lower end stuff, and you were supplementing that. I'm seeing a lot more interest and opportunity on the upper side, right? Where they're outsourcing that piece of it as well. So, there's a lot of opportunity out there right now.
There's also a lot of cooperation opportunity out there
Yes.
because there's a
I'm glad you said that.
There's a
Yep.
segregation of church and state when it comes to this as well. So there's a lot of people that are able to take on the CISO work and act in the consulting thing that can't be the operational partner in some cases. Now, many are also the tail that's wagging the dog and will bring their managed services from their company. And,
Yep.
that's something that might get looked at later. But, the point is you may find yourself working with other MSPs. You're the security advisor. They're the operators, and you're working with them to get the feedback on the operations to put into these assessments. So
It's funny that you said that, Brian. I have 2 clients right now that are doing that exact same thing, that I was able to introduce them in non-competing territories, but they're helping each other and doing it this way. And they're both sticking in their lanes, and it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And, as we record this, Right a Boom's going on right now, which is one of the conferences that's now dedicated to security. We'll be down at IT Nation Secure later this year. And it's just, there's become this need to really focus on cybersecurity and kind of look at operational and cyber a little bit differently, but yet everything ties together. And that's one of the things that we're trying to accomplish, as we continue on in our mission over at VCIO Toolbox. It's
Very
about how do
nice.
you allow yourself to communicate. Now, that wasn't meant as a pitch. You just got to think to yourself, how am I going to communicate this whole message of I'm your operational partner, but I need to be your leadership partner, and I need to bring this information to you. Yeah, the byproduct is making a sale, but I need to bring it to you as your advisor and really making sure that you're looking at things the right way. And then I got to listen to you when you tell me that isn't a big risk to me. I don't feel that risk is high enough to warrant me making that spend, and then understand why, and then track that decline, cover your own.
Very true. Very true. Well, Brian, that kind of brings us up to the end of this episode.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I got a little lesson here today, so I appreciate that. I always like when I get to learn from the guru, so I appreciate it.
Slow down there, pal. I learned from others, man. There's a lot of great guys out there sharing a lot of information, and we're all working together to try to, better the community.
If you take one thing from this episode, opening your conversations as a risk tolerance conversation, and what does that mean to you, and then being able to quantify that is really how you open up this type of consulting opportunity when you're speaking to a prospect. With that, Brian, do you have any other questions?
Well, my only
comments?
closing thought is, but do it not with the eye on fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's all.
Well said.
I want to understand your risk, because not all risks are equal. Not all risks need to be attended to immediately. So it doesn't feel like that dark fear, uncertainty, and doubt sale that, many of us have done in the past. So that's my closing salvo.
Well said. All right. So Brian, that is it for us today. We will be including I think we should put your LinkedIn profile with this episode. We're going to link it right back to you. It's going to be
up there all the time, Robb.
It's going to be a circular argument right back to you.
No, but yeah. No, our profiles are up there all the time. But if you do have questions, feel free to hit me up directly. I'm always happy to chat in the industry. There's, no pressure, no come see me on the product. We do this to talk to the community and educate the community. Yeah. If you feel like stopping by our sites, great. But, that's not the aim here.
All right. So Brian, with that, that's it for us for today. I wish you well, sir. I'm loving the background. I can't wait to see the next rendition.
We're getting there slowly but surely.
All right. Take care, sir.
All right, bud.